Hi, Julie Jules Cruise Companion. A couple of months ago, I mentioned that I was going on Carnival Splendor out of Sydney. Did those plans work out? What happened with the flights? What adventures did we have heading to Sydney for the Carnival Splendor October 22 cruise? Stick around and find out. When I ever travel to a cruise, I always go the night before to make sure that I have enough time so that I'm not going to miss out on my boarding of the craft. So with this flight to Sydney for Carnival Splendor in October of 2022, we booked the day before and we booked on Jetstar, and of course Jetstar changed our flight. I always try to get a morning flight because flights seem to not get cancelled or delayed as much as afternoon flights. But they changed us to an afternoon flight. They changed us to a later flight, and that means the plans that we had in Sydney for that evening were not going to work out. We were going to go to a show, but in reality, by the time we arrived in Sydney, it would have been too late to attend a show. So we went to Sydney and we went to our hotel, and it was only about less than a kilometre away from Circular Quay, and that was a plan that we thought was going to be reasonable. But we thought we were going to drag our bags from Circular Quay, the train station, to the hotel. But of course, Sydney gave us a little few surprises where most of the roads from Circular Quay has a slight gradient to it. So even though it was less than a kilometre, it was dragging our bags up the hill, basically, to the Sofitel Wentworth Hotel. Now, the other plan pre-mentioned in a previous video was that on the morning of the cruise departure, we were going to get on the hop-on, hop-off bus, just do the whole circuit, which takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours. That goes from Circular Quay. But we doesn't work on a Wednesday, and we were there on a Wednesday, so we didn't do our research well enough for that. And the other thing, it wouldn't have started until about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and that would have made us late for our 12:30 embarkation time. So we had the conversation between my travel buddy and I, were we going to go for another massage or would we do something else? So we went for a little bit of a walk. We went up to Martin Place. We had breakfast and that was really lovely. We then caught a couple of trains back down to Circular Quay because we had decided we were going to go on the Manly ferry so we could have a look at Carnival Splendor from a different angle and have a look at Sydney via the harbour. The ferry to Manly costs about $8.40 or $8.60. They don't need an Opal card for the ferry. You just need to tap your debit or credit card and then you go onto the little platform and you wait for the ferry to arrive. So looking at Sydney from the harbour, looking at the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge with the magnificent Carnival Splendor in the same picture was an absolute treat. And so it took about 30 minutes to get over to Manly, and we just stayed on the ferry and we turned around and came back again. We staggered our way back up the hill again to the Sofitel Wentworth Hotel, and then we got a taxi with our luggage back down to Circular Quay. There is a lot of roadworks and a lot of detours, so the taxi took us quite a long way to get us to the terminal there at Circular Quay. I'll do an absolutely separate video about embarkation process of Carnival, but lo and behold, we did eventually get on the boat and we went off on our cruise. When we got off the cruise, I always suggest to people to book a flight that is after 12 midday because then you don't have to rush to get off the boat to get to the airport for your journey home. In the party that I was in, there was a group of about 44 people, and I know that when we were on Moreton Island, somebody did get a notification that their flight had changed and it did come earlier. So it was after midday initially and they brought it forward to 9 o'clock and they didn't have the capacity to change that. So I must touch base with them to find out what happened with that. But getting off a boat that docks around 6:30, 7 o'clock and getting to the airport, going through security clearance, etc., 2 hours is not enough time. But I will say that when we did dock, clearance happened pretty quickly, and so people were starting to disembark about 7 a.m. off Carnival Splendor to Circular Quay. I will do a separate video about the disembarkation process of Carnival Splendor, but hazard to say, it was an interesting process. Because our flight was just after 1 o'clock, just before 2 o'clock, we thought that we would be able to get in the hop-on, hop-off bus, but it didn't start until like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So by the time we did the full circuit of that, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, got onto the train and got to the domestic airport, it would have cut things so too fine. So what we decided to do is we lazily stayed in our cabin for a while. We asked our cabin steward if we could leave our bags there while we went and had breakfast. We had breakfast, we came down, we collected our bags. We sat in a public space and watched the disembarkation process. And then once we did get off, when we were politely asked at 9 o'clock, please leave the boat, we did, and we ended up looking over the boat, which was beautiful, taking an extra couple of photos. But then one of the workers at the Circular Quay ferry terminal started to chat to us, and she had been on Carnival Splendor the week before, so we got to swap some stories. So the whole process of leaving the boat, getting onto the train at Circular Quay, it is a circle, and one direction T8 does take you directly to the airport, but we got on the train that went the other way, so we had to change at Central and then move on to the T8 that took us directly to the domestic airport. The crew, the staff at the train station were really friendly, and they told us which end of the platform was going to be easier to use the lifts, so that when we needed to change platforms at Central. So the cost of the journey on the train from Circular Quay to the domestic airport was $20.60, and that whole process went really well again. So I would always suggest that that is one of the viable options if you give yourself enough time, and if you're able-bodied to be able to get from the airport to the cruise terminal, or from the cruise terminal to the airport. It is a great service for New South Wales Transport. So that's just a little catch up on what happened, what my plans were initially. Did they work out? No, because plans never seem to work out. And we still had an absolutely fabulous time, tired and exhausted after an interesting 4-night cruise on Carnival Splendor in October of 2022. So this is Julie Jules Cruise Companion saying, stay safe everybody, and happy travels.